right, so a couple weeks ago, the wife and I were on vacation and we had a rental car, a Ford Excursion, and that Ford Excursion had drop-down running boards. So the first thing my wife said when she went to get in the truck was how easy it was to get into that big old SUV. So I took that as her giving me indirect permission to go out and get the same running boards for my truck. So that's what we're gonna do in today's video. So in today's installation, we're gonna be installing the GoRhino E1 drop-down running board kit on my 2020 Ram Rebel. So this was released a few months back from GoRhino team, and it's essentially their take on the drop-down running board. So you're going to have motors on each of the brackets. You're going to have a big old wide step. You're going to get all the wiring harnesses, the controller, the hardware, and everything you really need to set up your truck to have drop-down running boards. So we're going to be installing that today. You have a couple different options when you go to buy these things. One option is you can either opt for 2 brackets per side, or you could do 3 brackets per side. I believe what that does is it increases the capacity that you can have on the board. You know, if you're a big boy, maybe that's the route for you, but I went with the 2 brackets per side. The other option you have is the finish on the boards themselves. So I went with the texture black. It is going to match my GoRhino Saros rack, and I'll talk about that in a second here. But you can also get the truck bed liner cover or truck bed liner surface on your running board, which is going to be a little bit more durable. I think this is very well. This looks great, so it's going to match the truck perfectly. Going to match the factory bumper, and like I said, it's going to match that rack. The rack is off the truck because we had to go to a parking garage, and I needed every inch of clearance I can get, so that unfortunately is off in storage for now. We're going to start with installing the brackets themselves as well as the boards, and then got to go get the kids from school. We'll come back and we're going to focus on the wiring harness. So my goal today is to show you every bit of the installation to make sure that you can install this wiring harness on your own truck and you can tackle this yourselves, because it's not something you really need to go to a professional install. It's very easy to do it. The instructions are excellent. But for now, let's go ahead and get that truck pulled into the garage, and we're going to start with installing these guys. We'll obviously do it on the driver's side, but the instructions is very much the same. And then also on the driver's side, we're going to go ahead and install the control panel. First thing, make sure you get the motors oriented the right way. Again, if you look at the bottom corner of each bracket, it says what position it's in. This one says front left, so it's going to be the front driver's side. And you know you're on the right side because the motors are always going to be facing towards the front of the vehicle. If you did not have running boards on your truck before this installation, what you're going to want to do is get yourself one of these things. This is a thread die. It's an M8 1.25 thread die, and what you need to do is run this along each of the studs underneath the truck, because when they painted these trucks, they painted over the studs, and you want to make sure you get all that paint cleaned off, and you do that with one of these little die things. I'll leave a link down to this in the description. Anyway, we're going to install the front back bracket, the rear bracket, and then we're going to install the control module. We're going to find the hardware in the kit. It's 3 13mm nuts, washers, and split washers for the front and the back, and then the middle control panel is again 2 13mm nuts and with some washers. All right, I am underneath the truck. This is the front bracket position. These are studs that come welded to the body itself. Again, if this is your first time installing running boards on your truck, you're going to need to clear some of that paint off, and that's where that stud comes in. So you just want to thread it on there and then just ratchet it all the way down and then come back, and that'll cut the paint and give you a nice clean threads to install everything. But this is the front bracket. This is where that front motor mount is going to go. And then this is the middle bracket. This is where the control panel is going to go, and it's just going to mount on the 2 bottom studs. And then way back here is the third bracket, and that's where the second motor bracket mount is going to go. So, all right, so I have my front bracket installed. We have our control panel installed up underneath right there. You can kind of see it. Then we have our rear bracket installed. So now we have the step. The step is unpacked, and what you want to do now is locate these little sliding nut blocks, basically. So these blocks here are what fits into the little opening on each of the brackets. So what you're going to want to do is align them a little bit, or as close as you can, with the location before you go ahead and lift the running board up onto the brackets to install them. Then you're going to want to find the 4 5mm hex head bolts, and you're going to use 2 per position to mount the board itself to the actual brackets. Again, you're going to want to locate this guy, install it in here, and then once you get the bolts loosely threaded in there, you could slide the running board back and forth to where you want it. Obviously, but again, 4 5mm hex head bolts is what's going to go up through the bottom of the bracket into these little blocks here. So the easiest way is to just get them roughly in the right position, hold the board up, and then try to drop them down. Those little blocks will fit right into the little insert on each of the GoRhino brackets. All right, so the driver's side is done. I went ahead and also did the passenger side. So now what we need to do is turn our focus to the wiring harness, and I went ahead and unbundled it a little bit. I'm gonna pull my truck out of the garage, and then what we're gonna do is walk through what all plugs into this harness, because this is really just one big harness, and it'll be easier for me to show you if I can get everything spread out. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. It might make a lot more sense. All right, so I know this looks like a mess of wires, but I'm gonna explain my theory here in a second. So this is the main wiring harness for the GoRhino E1 steps. Everything here starts at the main controller. So you remember on the driver's side, we had that controller that installed on the middle step board spot. These 4 plugs are gonna go in there. You got the wide one, you got a 4-core, and then you got 2 of the smaller ones. Then you have this side of the wire loom. This is gonna go into your rear motor. This is gonna go into the front motor, and then you have your light plugs right here. So every motor has a corresponding light plug as well. So this is on the driver's side. Then you got this cross wire here. You know it's the cross wire because it's got thermal tape on there as well. Same thing on the other side. That front one's gonna go into the front motor, that rear plug in the back, and then again, each plug has a corresponding light plug, because remember, we're also installing lights that will go on the truck that will turn on when the boards are down. So we got our driver's side board plugs, passenger side board plugs. Then we have our positive and negative. So the red and black wire there, that's gonna go into the engine bay. Then we have these plugs here. So there are 3 plugs, 4. The black one is 2 wires. This is gonna plug into your override switch. Then you got a brown wire and a white wire. These are for your magnets that are gonna be attached inside the doors on the truck, so that when you open the door, it'll open up that magnet loop and drop the running boards. That's how the running boards know to open up. When you close the door, you're gonna get those magnets close together, then the board's gonna pop back up. Those are gonna go inside the truck. We're gonna talk about that one in a minute once we get the truck back in the garage. The black and red wires are gonna go into the engine bay from underneath the truck. This main plug cluster is gonna plug into the control panel, and then this side is gonna plug into the motors on the driver's side, cut across the middle of the truck. This is gonna plug into the passenger side. All right, so I have my wire harness staged, ready to go. I have everything separated as much as possible. Before you get too involved in this process, untangle everything. There's a lot of wire here. Last thing you want to do is plug something in and then all of a sudden find out that you're wrapped around another piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start on the back motor of the passenger side, plug that in and work my way over. That way I could work the harness this way, plug in on the brain, and then plug in the running board on the driver's side, and just kind of work my way up. We'll do the battery last after we do the inside of the truck, but ultimately it's really easy. This plug plugs into the motor, and there's a little pigtail on each motor that you plug that into, and then this is going to be for the corresponding light, which we'll install at the end of the entire project. So just going to be plugging in those motors for now. So let's go ahead, plug in all the motors and get everything situated. Then we'll dive inside the truck, pull the carpet up, and I'll show you how to pass these wires up through the floorboard into the cab so you can hook those up to the magnets on each of the doors. All right, so I have the running board motors and the light plugs in their location. Don't have light plugs plugged in for obvious reasons, but I do have the motors plugged in. Well, I'll go through the routing of wires at the end of the video. But now we're left with our internal override switch with our brown and white wires. And then we have our positive and negative plugs that need to go up to the battery. We're gonna hold this one off till later. Just tuck that off to the side. This is the wire that we're focused on now, and ultimately what we got to do is get that wire into the cab of the truck. So what we'll need to do is obviously remove our floor mat. Then we're going to need to remove this trim panel, well, it's all one, that whole trim panel, this trim panel, so that we could pull up the carpet and get access to a gasket in the floor so we could pop those wires through. So let me go ahead and remove these trim panels. All they do is just pull straight out, and then get the seat out of the way, get some lighting in here, and we'll take a look at how we pass those wires into the cab. All right, so once you get that trim panel removed, what you're going to want to do is pull the carpet up, and you're going to want to look right up here. So you see this black rubber insulation? You're going to want to pull that back, and what you're looking for is that oval plastic piece there. That is the gasket that, or that grommet that you're going to want to pop off with a flathead, so we can pop a hole in there and pull our wires through. So that's about where your left foot sits when you're driving the truck. Let me show you underneath the truck. So let me get underneath the truck, and I'll show you where that plug is at. All right, so we're up underneath the truck. This is the back of the driver's side wheel, and then this is the fender liner right here. So that plastic grommet that we're just looking at is going to be located, let me shimmy over here, inside the square hole. So in this square hole, you see the back of the plastic plug here, and if we just push on it from this side, it'll push it out into the cab. So that's where we're going to want to run the wires, that brown, white, and then the trigger for the override switch. So what we might end up doing is running it through these little openings here to give us little areas to zip tie things through. But ultimately, that's where you're trying to run the wire. Okay, so we have that black plastic gasket out. This is the bottom that we're looking at from inside the wheel well. So ultimately what I'm going to do is drill about a 1/2 inch hole right down in the center of that. That way it's big enough to get these plugs through there. So you got 2 bullet connectors for our magnets, and then you got our plug for our switch. That should pop right through there. And then like I said, once I pull the wires through there, I have enough space inside that area to hit it with a little bit of silicone just to seal it up nicely. And then I might even hit the edge of this with some silicone just to re-glue it back to the floor, just to make sure we got no issues in the future. But there's foam on there, it should be fine. But again, if I hit it with some silicone, it should be more than capable of keeping everything weatherproof. But all right, so we have our grommet modified so I could fit everything through there. Again, I just drilled like a 1/2 inch hole, and then I went side to side just to make sure I could fit that white plug, and then the 2 bullet connectors from the white and brown wire fit perfectly. So now what I'm going to do is hit this with some silicone on the back, and then hit it with some silicone right in the middle there, probably on the back side of it, and then go ahead and reinstall it underneath here. We have what we need out of that. I'm going to plug in the switch and just leave that switch loosely dangled over here, so that way I could close up everything down here. And then what we'll do is we'll focus on installing the magnets, which is what ties into these 2 wires. So this is going to be the most tedious work. The hardest part was really done, is basically running everything into the cab. Now the rest of this is just more of a patience exercise. All right, now I know I said I'd wait till later on in the installation to mount the switch, but I figured I might as well do it now so I can close up all the carpet. So you can see the switch wire from that grommet, which is about right here, comes underneath the carpet, runs up across the dash here, and then if you could see really closely, right up underneath here, there's a little control module that I just stuck the switch right to. Let's see if you can get, so you can see that switch. So it's easy to get to without having to remove any sort of panels or anything like that, but again, it's up out of the way, you don't see it. Next thing we need to do is connect the magnets for the doors. Now this is my only gripe with this kit, is these wires appear to be just a tad too short, because ultimately this wire has to come over here, has to connect into this little harness, and there's not nearly enough wire to get it connected to here, and then also on the other side of the door for the back door. So ultimately what I'm doing is add a little length of wire on there just to get me probably another 1.5 to 2 feet of wire length to here, so I could connect to the magnet pieces, and then we'll start talking on this. But okay, so the way these magnets work is the receiving end here is going to be about there, about 2 inches above the door latch. Then on the outside of the door itself, so on this edge, you're going to install one of these little magnets, and there it's an opposite polarization. When you close the door and those 2 magnets get close to each other, they're going to close the loop and tell the running boards to come pick up. When you open the door, it's going to open that loop, and it's going to tell the running boards to drop. So that's how you get that smart sensing. So if I open up this door, basically this whole side is 1 loop, so the whole driver's side is 1 loop. So if I open up this door, it's going to drop the running board. If that door is closed but I open up the rear, it's still going to drop the running board because you're interrupting that loop. I went ahead, pulled the B-pillar plastic off. Basically it's just push tabs, pull it straight that way, and everything will come off. So start with this middle piece, then you can get the bottom piece off. Then what we're going to do is go ahead and install these. So there's certain measurements that they give you in the directions. Sorry, lighting's kind of shitty here. Certain measurements they give you in the instructions for the rear and front door. We're going to follow those, and I'm going to go ahead and install these. But in order to do so and make sure it's nice and clean, we're going to need to pull this rubber gasket off. So all you got to do is just pull straight on the gasket, and that's all you need to do to get that wire run through here. So we're going to run the magnet. It's going to stick about here. That wire is going to snake along here, and then we're going to push the gasket back down so it holds the wire in place. Do the same on the rear portion. Same thing. Pull off that weather strip there. The magnet I think is going to be about somewhere over here or up above, 4.5 inches I think below. So same thing, just going to run that magnet here, snake the wire around, and then what we need to do is ground the magnet loop. So we're going to use this bolt right here and ground everything. There's already a pigtail on there, or there's already a little spade connector on there to back this bolt off, slip the ground on, and then tighten it back up. Okay, so we are in the passenger or the driver's side rear seat. You can see I got the magnet there. The wire passes through the rubber gasket, and then I have a bundle of wires here, and then you have the front driver's side wire that cuts through here underneath the gasket, and it's on the inside of the threshold. This is the ground that I was talking about. There's one of these on each side. This is the only bolt inside the B pillar. So back off that 10 millimeter. That's where you're going to ground your magnets to. Just make sure you zip tie up everything nice and tightly. You can see I got my ambient lighting in there as well, but everything is zip tied up so that it's not going to bounce around in there. This is where you're going to hear ticks, you know, when wires bouncing off of plastic panels. But the same thing is going to happen on the other side. You're going to do the same thing with the magnets. So you're going to run them underneath the rubber gasket inside the threshold. There's measurements. This is 4 1/8 to the top of the sensor there, 2 inches on the front sensor. And then what we'll do, once we get everything buttoned up here, we'll worry about the other side of the magnets, which is just a little tiny piece of metal that goes on the inside to close up the loop here. But we could use painter's tape to aim that. But again, one other thing, in order to run that white wire from underneath the door or underneath the steering column all the way across, I was trying to fight with it multiple different ways. I ended up running it underneath the dash. That's the easiest way. Run it underneath the dash, come down the A-pillar on the passenger side, and then you can meet up with everything right there. You could see, let's see. You could see the wire, little red wire. I added a little bit on there, but then I have everything zip tied up and out of the way. So I'm gonna close up all these trim panels. Okay, so I have the magnets all situated on each of the doors. I did not do the small section that goes on the actual door itself. I wanna get power to the boards so that I could aim those properly. So what we're gonna do now is go back up underneath the truck. We're gonna go behind the wheel well. Let me turn off my headlamp here. And we're gonna run the positive and negative leads that go to the power of the controller up the back of the wheel well liner, and it's gonna pop up basically right over here. So all you need to do is take a fish tape, run it this way. It'll follow the back of the wheel well liner, and then we're just going to run that wire right back up and attach the positive to the red, negative to the black, and we'll be good to go as far as power. Then we'll go back to each of the door positions, grab those little tiny magnet pieces, and start to aim each of those. And then at that point, then we can go back underneath the truck and then zip tie up everything out of the way. Because right now everything's just kind of a rat's nest. Because I wanted to make sure I got everything plugged in and situated first before I went back through and finalized the position and everything. Okay, so like I said, I ran the power up the back of the wheel well liner, so basically straight up this way. It pops out right down in this jumble of wires. If you use a fish tape, you'll be easily able to find it. Then I went ahead and ran that negative to the negative terminal here, and then the positive to the positive terminal. Both sides of that, the positive and negative, have fuses, so I just dropped that in this little cavity here, and then we're good to go. We could button that up. And everything is good to go on the engine side of things. So you'll notice the running board's already popped in. I was messing around with things, but let me get the engine closed and let me show you how I aimed the magnets on the inside of the door, because basically that's the last thing we need to do outside of going up underneath, zip tying up all the wires, and then doing the light. All right, so now that we have power to our running boards, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that our switch underneath our dash is set to on. So if you haven't confirmed that yet, go up underneath, make sure it's set to on. So then the other thing we want to do is grab our magnets. So you're going to get 4 of these little magnets, and these are going to go on the door side, and these are going to be what tells the magnets and that loop that you installed if the doors open or close. So when these magnets get close to the magnet inside the door sill here, watch the running board. So when the magnet gets close, the running board goes back in. When the door is open and the magnet moves away, the running board pops out. So all we need to do to aim this, it's really simple. Basically what you got to do is just stick this somewhere on the door, about where you think it needs to go. So it's roughly 3 inches off at the top of the latch here. And then just slowly close the door. And as you close the door, if you got to aim right, cause the running board to pop in. But you need to make sure you have both of them, the front and back door, situated. So back door here. That magnet goes way down here. That one's a lot easier to aim because the sensors are really close to each other. But on the front door, all you got to do basically is just watch it and make sure that the magnet itself is aligned with this magnet right here, and then it'll shut. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is install the lights. I already have both sides plugged in. I was just kind of playing with location, but basically all you need to do is clean this little pinch weld up underneath the truck, and then that is where the LEDs will install. So here's the LED. It's basically just going to fix right to there, and then it's going to light up our running board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up the wiring, and then tomorrow we'll come back and take a look at everything in the daylight, because then it's definitely nighttime here. I hate the fall, but it'll be a lot easier to see everything tomorrow. So let's go ahead, clean up everything, and then I'll catch you in a few hours. All right, so let's take a look at the operation one more time before we get up underneath the truck and take a look at the wiring routing. So if I go to open the driver's side door, running boards pop out. If I leave that door open, Open up the passenger door, running boards stay out. Close this door, running boards still stay out. Close that door, running boards tuck away once all the doors on that side are closed, and it closes that magnet loop. The other thing you could do is with that override switch, so if you remember, I installed it up underneath the dash, but go ahead and flip that switch. It turns off the running boards so that if you, for whatever reason, let's say you're camping or you're off-road and there's a big rock or something there that you don't want the running boards to open up on top of, you could turn the running boards off so they're not going to deploy. But let's get the truck up on jack stands and take a look at the wire routing, because it's a little complicated and there's some tricks that I want to show you so that it'll help you on your installation. All right, so we are up underneath the driver's side. We're taking a look at the controller right here. You got the controller mounted at the middle running board position. You got your rear motor, and then you have your front motor right about here. So as far as the wire harnesses and how you run them, so let's take a look at them one at a time. So the first thing we'll talk about is our running board harness on the driver's side. That you plug right into the controller. You run it along this factory bundle of wires here, and then you go to the rear, do the same thing, and it plugs right into the top. You can see the wire harness plugs in right by this plug right about here. Then your light plugs in just the same. This is the light wire for the front motor position. Same thing in the rear. That wire is going to run along this factory bundle, just zip tied up out of the way. Second bundle, the second wire harness is going to run over to the passenger side, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So you're going to plug into the controller here. You're going to follow this little bundle, and then what I did is I hopped up over the chassis here, and then I followed this member all the way across. So you can see this is the wire harness, and it has a thermal sleeve on it. This thermal sleeve actually slides on the wire, so you want to make sure that it's where it needs to be, which is basically right about here, to protect from the heat coming off the drivetrain and the heat coming off the exhaust. Once you get to the other side, keep everything zip tied to that cross member, and then just take that wire harness, hop it up over the chassis, and then you can plug into the front position there, rear position in the back. Last two harnesses you have, the positive and negative, very simple. Run that along this wire harness here, and then up the wheel well right into the engine bay. That was a very clean, simple, straight shot. Then the last one is the one that goes into the cab. That's your brown, white, and black wire harness. That's going to follow this bundle as well. It's going to start to travel up the wheel well, but it's going to pop into that gray gasket that we showed just on the inside of that wheel well. You can pull the wheel well liner back a little bit and it'll expose it. That's how you pop into the cab. But that is how I ran the wire harnesses. If you have any questions on this one, by all means, leave a question down in the comments below. Happy to answer that. It gets a little tricky. It's not impossible, but it is a lot of wire harness to deal with. You're going to use a ton of zip ties. Don't feel like you're using too many, because you want to keep this stuff from falling down and up and out of the way. Specifically when you get to this portion, you want to make sure that there is no way this wire could ever come loose and get tangled up in your drivetrain or get caught on your exhaust pipe over here. So keep everything a fair share distance away from the heat source and moving parts. But let's hop out and take a look at the running board operation one more time, because there's one more benefit of these things outside of them being super easy to use that I didn't point out that I want to show you on the side of the vehicle. All right, so just a couple final thoughts. Outside of the fact that these drop-down running boards are probably one of the best accessibility upgrades you can make for the truck, I think there's one thing that doesn't get mentioned a lot, and it's the aesthetic upgrade that it gives your truck. So now that these running boards tuck far up underneath the truck, it actually makes the truck look taller without even having to install a leveling kit or lift kit or whatnot. So I have a 2-inch leveling kit on everything, 1 inch in the rear. And with these drop-down running boards, with how far the GoRhino ones tuck up underneath the truck, there's this optical illusion that the truck is actually taller than if I had, static running boards, or even the Mopar drop-down running boards. Those stick out a little bit further than these E1s do, and they kind of cut down on your ground clearance, or at least the appearance of a higher ground clearance. So these E1s tuck nicely up underneath the truck, and they do give your truck a slightly taller look compared to other running board versions, so compared to the ones that are static running boards or even the Mopar ones. But with that said, that's how you install the GoRhino E1 drop-down running boards. If you have any questions, let me know. Definitely use my coupon codes. I'll leave those down in the description below. Thank you very much. Appreciate you watching. Bye.